The empty penthouse. Natalie Morgan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of their San Francisco penthouse, watching the city lights flicker to life as evening descended over the bay. The view stretched from the Golden Gate Bridge to the glittering downtown skyline, worth millions in real estate value alone. Yet standing there in the gathering darkness, Natalie felt like the loneliest woman in the world. She was 29 years old with natural, auburn hair that fell in loose curls past her shoulders, pale skin dotted with freckles, and striking green eyes that once sparkled with life. Tonight, those eyes held only resignation. 4 years ago, this penthouse had represented a dream come true. Now it felt like a beautiful prison. Behind her, she heard the familiar sound of the elevator doors opening. Jonathan Blake entered their home like he entered every space, with purpose and efficiency. At 38, he stood 6 feet tall, with sandy brown hair always perfectly styled, sharp gray eyes, and a lean athletic build maintained by early morning workouts with his personal trainer. He wore his usual work uniform, a navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "I have a board meeting in Tokyo on Thursday," Jonathan said without preamble, his eyes fixed on his phone screen. His voice was smooth and measured, the same tone he used with investors. "The plane leaves Wednesday night." Natalie turned slowly from the window. "Thursday is our anniversary." Jonathan finally looked up, and for just a moment, something flickered across his handsome face. Surprise, perhaps guilt. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual polite detachment. "Right. I'll have Rebecca send flowers." Rebecca Turner, his 40-year-old executive assistant, who seemed to know more about Jonathan's schedule than his own wife did. "Always, Rebecca." "I don't want flowers from Rebecca," Natalie said quietly, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I want my husband to remember our anniversary without his assistant reminding him." Jonathan set down his phone, and Natalie could see him shifting into what she privately called his negotiation mode. The slight softening of his expression, the careful attention, all designed to manage the situation efficiently. "Natalie, you know how important this Tokyo deal is. Blake Technologies is expanding into 3 new Asian markets. The timing is critical, more important than us." She hadn't meant to ask it. Hadn't meant to sound so desperate. That's not fair. His jaw tightened. "Everything I do is for us." "For our future?" "No," Natalie replied, and she was surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "Everything you do is for Blake Technologies. I'm just part of the household staff at this point. Someone who keeps the penthouse running smoothly in the background." He stood in silence, the vast living room with its modern furniture and expensive art suddenly feeling too large, too empty. Natalie remembered their wedding day 4 years ago on a beach in Maui, how Jonathan had held her face in his hands and promised her that success would never change what they had. When had that promise broken? When had she become invisible? "I need to make some calls before dinner," Jonathan said finally, already turning toward his home office. "There's a problem with the Singapore office that needs handling." Natalie watched him walk away, her heart aching with familiar pain. She'd spent months trying everything to recapture his attention. Cooking his favorite meals, waiting up despite his late arrivals, suggesting date nights that never happened. Nothing worked. She'd become background noise in his empire. The intervention the next morning. Amanda Foster arrived at the penthouse with coffee and determination written across her face. Amanda was Natalie's college roommate turned best friend. A successful interior designer with wild black hair, warm brown skin, and an uncanny ability to read people. "Okay. Enough is enough," Amanda announced, setting down 2 lattes and fixing Natalie with a serious look. "I love you, but I can't watch you disappear anymore." Natalie wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for something to hold on to. "What are you talking about? Don't play innocent with me. You've lost weight. You barely leave this penthouse except for those boring charity functions where you smile and nod while Jonathan networks. You gave up your photography career, your friends, everything to be the perfect wife for a man who barely notices you exist." The truth of it hurt worse than Natalie expected. She had been a promising commercial photographer when she met Jonathan, booking campaigns with major brands, building a reputation. After their wedding, she'd gradually let it all go. believing that supporting Jonathan's skyrocketing career was more important. "What am I supposed to do?" Natalie asked, hating how defeated she sounded. "Leave him." "I still love him, Amanda. That's the worst part. After everything, I still love him." "Then make him remember why he fell in love with you," Amanda said firmly. "Stop being the invisible, accommodating wife and remind him that Natalie Morgan is a force to be reckoned with." "How exactly do I do that?" Amanda's smile turned mischievous. "I'm glad you asked." The plan 3 hours later, Natalie stood in an exclusive boutique in Union Square, staring at herself in a dressing room mirror. The woman looking back was almost unrecognizable. The dress was a deep crimson silk that hugged every curve before ending daringly mid-thigh. The neckline was elegant but daring, and the back dipped low, revealing smooth skin that rarely saw sunlight. It was bold, confident, everything Natalie hadn't let herself be in years. "Oh my God," Amanda breathed from behind her. "Jonathan is going to lose his mind." "It's too much," Natalie said. But she couldn't stop looking at her reflection. When had she forgotten that she could look like this? Feel like this? It's perfect. And you're wearing it to the Children's Hospital Charity Gala on Saturday? Natalie's eyes widened. That's a huge event. Every tech executive in the Bay Area will be there. Jonathan has been planning his attendance for months because of the networking opportunities. "Exactly," Amanda said with satisfaction. "And you're going to walk in there looking absolutely stunning and remind everyone, including your husband, exactly who you are." "I don't know if I can do this," Natalie admitted. But her reflection told a different story. The woman in crimson looked powerful, vibrant, alive. "Yes, you can." Because the alternative is continuing to fade away until there's nothing left of the woman Jonathan fell in love with. Amanda squeezed her shoulder. "Sometimes you have to shake things up to save what matters." Natalie bought the dress. The preparations Saturday arrived with California sunshine, and Natalie's nerves stretched thin. Jonathan had left early for a meeting, barely pausing to confirm they'd meet at the gala venue. Business as usual. He had no idea what was coming. Natalie spent the afternoon preparing with an intensity she hadn't felt in years. A trip to her favorite salon resulted in her auburn hair being styled in elegant waves that framed her face perfectly. Her makeup artist created a look that was sophisticated but dramatic, emphasizing her green eyes and making her skin glow. When she finally slipped into the crimson dress at 6 o'clock, Natalie felt something shift inside her. This wasn't about making Jonathan jealous, she realized. This was about remembering who she was before she'd made herself small to fit into his world. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. "Running 15 minutes late. Meet you there." Of course he was. But tonight Natalie didn't mind. Let him arrive expecting to find his usual invisible wife. The surprise would be so much sweeter. Amanda arrived to find Natalie standing in front of the mirror, barely recognizing herself. "You look incredible," her friend said softly. "Are you ready for this?" Natalie took a deep breath, meeting her own green eyes in the reflection. The woman looking back was strong, beautiful, worthy of attention and love. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm ready." The arrival of the St. Regis Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the wealth of San Francisco's elite. Natalie arrived alone, her crimson dress flowing around her legs as she stepped out of the car. Photographers lined the entrance, capturing arrivals for the society pages. She could feel eyes turning toward her as she entered. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads swiveled. A ripple of attention swept through the crowd like a wave, and Natalie held her head high, channeling every ounce of confidence she possessed. And then she saw Jonathan. He stood near the bar with Richard Cole, his business partner. Deep in conversation about quarterly projections or market expansion or whatever consumed his every waking moment, he wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his sandy hair gleaming under the chandeliers. Looking every inch the successful billionaire CEO, he hadn't noticed her yet. Typical, but others had. Natalie felt a hand on her elbow and turned to find Dylan Hayes, a charming entrepreneur she'd met briefly at a previous gala. He was handsome in a boyish way, with dark hair and warm hazel eyes that held genuine interest. Natalie Morgan, Dylan said with an appreciative smile. I almost didn't recognize you. You look absolutely stunning. Thank you, Natalie replied, surprised by how natural it felt to accept the compliment. Can I get you a drink? Or better yet, would you honor me with a dance? Natalie glanced across the ballroom. Jonathan was still engrossed in his conversation, completely unaware of her presence. Something reckless stirred in her chest. I'd love to dance, she said. As Dylan led her onto the dance floor, Natalie felt the weight of many eyes following them. And finally, she felt Jonathan's gaze lock onto her like a laser. Let the awakening begin, the dance that changed. Everything Dylan Hayes was an excellent dancer. Guiding Natalie smoothly across the polished floor to the jazzy rhythm of the live band, he kept a respectful distance. His conversation light and engaging as he talked about his startup company and asked genuine questions about her photography background, but Natalie could barely focus on his words. Every nerve in her body was attuned to Jonathan's presence across the ballroom, to the weight of his stare that felt almost physical against her bare back. Your husband is watching us, Dylan observed with an amused smile. And if looks could kill, I'd be a dead man right now. Natalie risked a glance toward the bar. Jonathan stood completely still, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. His gray eyes locked on her with an intensity she hadn't seen in years. Even from across the crowded ballroom, she could see the rigid set of his jaw. The way his free hand had curled into a tight fist at his side, this was not the controlled, detached Jonathan she'd lived with for months. This was something raw and barely contained. He's fine, Natalie lied, her pulse racing. Really? Because he looks like he's about to challenge me to a duel. Dylan's hazel eyes sparkled with mischief. Should I be worried? Before Natalie could respond, the song ended. Dylan bowed gracefully, thanking her for the dance. But as Natalie turned to leave the floor, a familiar hand closed around her elbow. Firm, possessive, unmistakably Jonathan's. Excuse us, Jonathan said to Dylan, his voice dangerously quiet. He didn't wait for a reply, already steering Natalie away from the dance floor with barely controlled urgency. Jonathan, what are you doing? Natalie tried to pull back, but his grip only tightened.
Not here.
His voice was rough. Strained in a way she'd never heard before, he guided her through the crowd with single-minded determination, past curious glances and raised eyebrows. Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs as he led her out of the ballroom, down a hallway lined with expensive art, and finally, through a door into a private meeting room clearly reserved for VIP guests. The moment the door closed behind them, Jonathan released her arm and turned to face her. The transformation was startling. Gone was the polished CEO, replaced by a man barely holding on to his composure. His sandy hair was disheveled where he'd run his hand through it. His bow tie loosened, his chest rising and falling with barely controlled breaths. The confrontation, what the hell was that? Jonathan demanded, his gray eyes blazing. Natalie lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated despite her racing pulse. It was a dance. At a charity gala, where dancing typically occurs, don't. Jonathan took a step toward her, and Natalie saw something dangerous flickering in his expression. Don't play games with me, Natalie. That dress, dancing with a man you barely know, letting him touch you while every man in that ballroom stared at your legs. It's good, Natalie said, the word sharp as broken glass. Maybe if other men can see me, you'll finally remember I exist. Jonathan froze. What? You heard me? For years of silence, of being treated like furniture, of watching herself disappear, came flooding out. When was the last time you really looked at me, Jonathan? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about your schedule? When was the last time you touched me like you actually wanted to? Natalie, I've been working. The company expansion, the new markets, I know about the work. I've always known. Her voice cracked slightly. But at some point, you stopped coming home to me. You stopped seeing me as your wife and started seeing me as just another part of your life that runs smoothly in the background. Jonathan stared at her, something cracking in his carefully constructed armor. That's not true. I never meant to make you feel invisible, didn't you? Natalie felt hot tears threatening but refused to let them fall. You have Rebecca handle everything related to me. our anniversary, my birthday, even choosing my Christmas present. You schedule me into your calendar like a board meeting. You walk past me in our own home without even seeing me, because you're always there, Jonathan said suddenly, the words torn from somewhere deep. You're always patient, understanding, waiting for me to have time. I thought you were happy. I thought we had an agreement about what our marriage would be. Natalie laughed, the sound hollow and painful. I was dying, Jonathan. Slowly, quietly, trying so hard not to bother you with my needs that I almost forgot I had any. I gave up my career, my friends, my entire identity to be the perfect wife for a man who barely notices when I'm in the same room. The silence that fell between them was suffocating. Jonathan's hands had curled into fists again, but this time it wasn't anger. It was anguish. The breaking point I saw you tonight, Jonathan said finally, his voice raw and unsteady. Walking into that ballroom in this dress, looking like something out of a dream, and every man there wanted you. I watched them look at you the way I used to look at you, and I wanted to tear the room apart. Why? Natalie whispered, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously. Why now? Why does it take other men wanting me for you to remember that you do? Jonathan closed the distance between them in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the intensity burning in his gray eyes. Because I'm a fool, he said hoarsely. Because I took you for granted. Because I forgot that the most valuable thing I have isn't Blake Technologies or my net worth. It's you. Natalie's breath caught as his thumb traced her cheekbone. This close, she could see genuine torment in his eyes. Vulnerability she hadn't witnessed since their wedding day. I'm not a possession. Jonathan, she said softly, even as she leaned into his touch. You can't ignore me for months, and then claim me the moment someone else shows interest. I know. His forehead dropped to rest against hers, his breath warm against her lips. God, Natalie, I know. But seeing you tonight, watching you shine the way you used to, realizing what I've been destroying while I chased success, it's killing me. You hurt me, Natalie said, letting the tears fall now. For months you hurt me every single day by making me feel like I didn't matter, like I was invisible in my own marriage. I'm sorry. Jonathan's voice broke on the words. I'm so sorry. I don't have an excuse. I was so focused on building the company, on proving myself, that I lost sight of why I was doing any of it. You were supposed to be my reason, and instead, I made you my afterthought. Natalie pulled back enough to look at his face. Seeing the genuine remorse there, the fear that he might have destroyed something irreparable. How do I know you won't go back to the way things were? How do I know this isn't just a temporary reaction to jealousy? You don't, Jonathan admitted with brutal honesty. I can't promise perfection, but I can promise that I'll fight for us every single day, that I'll never take you for granted again, that I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you're the most important thing in my world. His hands were still cradling her face, and Natalie could feel herself being pulled back into his orbit, into the love that had never really died. Just gotten buried under neglect and loneliness. I need things to change, she said firmly. Really change. Not just words, Jonathan. Actions. Tell me what you need. Anything. The promises. Natalie took a shaky breath, steadying herself. I want you present. Not just physically in the same room, but actually there with me. I want real conversations, real time together. No phones during dinner, no laptops in bed. No treating our marriage like another item on your schedule? Done, Jonathan said immediately. I want my life back. My photography career. The chance to be someone other than just Mrs. Jonathan Blake. Her voice gained strength. I need my own identity, my own purpose. I never asked you to give that up, Jonathan said quietly. That was my biggest failure. Not encouraging you to keep doing what you loved. Not noticing when you started disappearing into my shadow. I need to know that when there's a crisis, when work demands your attention, you won't forget about me again. That I'll still be a priority, not an afterthought. Jonathan's hands slid down to her shoulders, his gray eyes searching hers with desperate intensity. You'll be the first person I think about when I wake up, and the last before I sleep. I'll put you before every meeting, every deal, every expansion plan. I swear it. even if it costs you business. Especially then, because what good is building an empire if I lose my kingdom? He pulled her closer, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. Natalie, you are my kingdom. Everything else is just noise. Natalie felt something loosening in her chest, a knot of resentment and pain beginning to unravel. She wanted to believe him, wanted to fall back into his arms and trust that this time would be different. I still love you, she admitted, the confession torn from somewhere deep. That's the terrifying part. After everything, I still love you so much it hurts. Jonathan's breath hitched. Thank God, because I love you too. I never stopped even when I was too blind to show it. He kissed her then, soft and tender and full of promises that tasted like hope. Natalie let herself melt into him, let herself remember how good they could be together when he was actually present, actually hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jonathan rested his forehead against hers. We should probably go back to the gala. People will talk. Let them talk, Natalie said, surprising herself. I'm done caring what people think. Jonathan smiled, really smiled, for the first time all evening. There's the woman I married. Fierce and fearless and absolutely breathtaking. She's been here all along. You just forgot to look. Never again, Jonathan promised. Starting right now. I'm going to spend every day proving that I see you, that I choose you, that you're the center of my entire world. As they left the private room hand in hand, heading back toward the ballroom and the curious stares of San Francisco's elite, Natalie felt something shift inside her. They weren't magically fixed. Trust would take time to rebuild. Patterns would need to change. But for the first time in months, she had hope. In watching Jonathan's possessive hand on her back, seeing the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room, Natalie allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. The crisis hits 3 days after the gala. Natalie woke to find Jonathan already awake, sitting on the edge of their bed with his phone pressed to his ear. The early morning San Francisco fog pressed against the windows, and his voice was tense. What do you mean there's a discrepancy? I personally reviewed those numbers. Pause. No, don't say anything to the board yet. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call, and Natalie saw the stress already creeping back into his expression. Old habits threatening to resurface. What's wrong? She asked softly, sitting up. Jonathan turned to her. She saw him wrestling with his instinct to handle everything alone versus his promise to include her. Finally, he took a deep breath. There's a problem with the Seattle office expansion. Someone's been manipulating financial data to make it look like we've been inflating profit projections. How bad is it? Bad enough that if the board finds out before I can fix it, Blake Technologies could lose investor confidence. Our stock could crash. He ran a hand through his sandy hair, frustration evident. I need to get to the office. Natalie watched him start to retreat into CEO mode, watched the walls beginning to rebuild. Then she made a decision. I'm coming with you. Jonathan's head snapped toward her. What? You promised transparency. You promised to include me instead of shutting me out. Natalie climbed out of bed, already heading for the closet. So I'm coming with you. Let me see what you're really dealing with, instead of sitting here alone wondering. For a moment, she thought he might argue. Then his expression softened. You're right. Get dressed. We leave in 15 minutes. Inside Blake Technologies occupied 40 floors of a gleaming tower in the financial district. Natalie had been here before for corporate parties and holiday events, but never during a real crisis. The energy was palpable the moment they stepped off the executive elevator. Staff rushed past with urgent expressions. Conference rooms were full of people hunched over laptops and financial reports. And through the glass walls of the main conference room, Natalie could see Richard Cole and several other senior executives waiting with grim faces. Jonathan, thank God. Richard stood as they entered. He was 55 with silver hair and sharp blue eyes. Jonathan's mentor and business partner for over a decade. His gaze flickered to Natalie with surprise. Mrs. Blake, I didn't expect to see you here. Call me Natalie, and I'm not going anywhere. She settled into a chair beside Jonathan. ignoring the curious looks from the other executives. For the next 2 hours, Natalie watched her husband transform into the brilliant strategist the business world knew. He dissected financial reports with laser precision, identified patterns others had missed, and systematically dismantled the fraudulent data to reveal the truth beneath. But true to his promise, every 20 minutes or so, Jonathan's hand would find hers under the table. A brief squeeze, a small acknowledgement that she was there. It was subtle, but it meant everything. Someone's been systematically altering the Seattle numbers for 3 months, Jonathan said finally, his voice cold. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate sabotage. But who would have access? Richard asked, troubled. That's when Rebecca Turner appeared in the doorway, her usual composed demeanor shaken. Jonathan, we found something. The altered files all trace back to my login credentials. The betrayal revealed the room fell silent. Rebecca had been Jonathan's executive assistant for 6 years, privy to every confidential detail of Blake Technologies. If she was the leak, the damage could be catastrophic. That's impossible, Jonathan said flatly. Rebecca, you've been with me since the beginning? You have nothing to gain from sabotaging the company. I know, but the digital trail doesn't lie. Rebecca's voice trembled. Jonathan, I swear I didn't do this. Someone must have stolen my passwords or cloned my access. Or you're lying, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Jennifer Walsh entering the conference room. She was a private investigator in her early 40s with short black hair and calculating brown eyes. Richard had clearly called her without telling anyone. I've been investigating the data breach since yesterday, Jennifer said, placing a folder on the table. And I found something interesting. Rebecca's been meeting regularly with Michael Grant. Natalie felt Jonathan stiffen beside her. Michael Grant was the CEO of Techfront Industries, Blake Technologies' biggest competitor, a ruthless businessman known for corporate espionage and hostile takeovers. That's not what it looks like, Rebecca said quickly, but her face had gone pale. Jennifer opened the folder, revealing photographs of Rebecca meeting Grant in various locations over the past 6 months. Coffee shops, hotel lobbies, dimly lit restaurants. He said he loved me, Rebecca whispered, tears streaming down her face. Michael said we would be together if I just helped him with one thing. He needed insider information about the Seattle expansion so Techfront could make a competing bid. I didn't know he was planning to sabotage you, Jonathan. I swear I thought it was just corporate intelligence. The silence was devastating. Natalie felt Jonathan's hand tighten around hers, the only sign of how much this betrayal was costing him. How long? Jonathan asked quietly. 6 months? He approached me at an industry conference. Made me feel special, valued. Rebecca's voice broke. I was lonely, stupid, and he used that against me. Jonathan stood slowly, his face a mask of controlled fury. Security will escort you from the building. Our lawyers will be in touch. If you cooperate with the investigation, we might be able to keep criminal charges off the table. Jonathan, please. I'm so sorry.
Ow!
Rebecca. As security led a sobbing Rebecca away, the conference room remained silent. Natalie could see the tension in Jonathan's shoulders, the way his jaw was clenched so tight it must have hurt. This was the moment where the old Jonathan would have exploded or retreated into cold detachment. Instead, he turned to her. I need a minute. Natalie stood, following him out of the conference room and into his private office. The moment the door closed, Jonathan leaned against his desk, his carefully maintained composure cracking. 6 years, he said hoarsely. I trusted her with everything. And she sold me out for a man who was using her. Natalie crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. I'm so sorry. How do I come back from this? How do I trust anyone again when someone that close to me could betray everything we built? Standing together, you're not alone anymore, Natalie said firmly, making him look at her. You have me. And we'll figure this out together. Jonathan searched her face, and she saw the moment he truly understood. After months of handling everything alone, of carrying the weight of his empire by himself, he finally had a real partner. What do I do? He asked, vulnerability raw in his voice. First, You go back in there and fix the immediate crisis. Secure the data, reassure the board, make sure Blake Technologies is protected. Natalie squeezed his hands. Then we deal with Michael Grant together. Together, Jonathan repeated, like he was testing the word. That's what marriage is supposed to be. A partnership. Not you carrying everything while I wait at home wondering if you still care. Something shifted in Jonathan's expression. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. Thank you for being here. For not running when things got complicated. I'm your wife, Jonathan. Complicated is part of the deal. They stood like that for a long moment, drawing strength from each other. When they finally broke apart, some of the devastation had left Jonathan's eyes, replaced by determination. Back in the conference room, Jonathan laid out a plan with Richard and the legal team. They would expose Grant's scheme, protect the Seattle expansion, and ensure Rebecca faced appropriate consequences. But Natalie noticed something different in how Jonathan operated now. He delegated more, trusted his team, didn't try to control every detail himself, and every so often, his eyes would find hers across the table, drawing strength from her presence. The confrontation 2 days later. Jennifer Walsh delivered the final evidence. Michael Grant had been systematically targeting Blake Technologies for over a year, using Rebecca to gain insider information and manipulate data. His goal was to tank Blake Technologies' stock price so TechFront could launch a hostile takeover. What do you want to do? Richard asked Jonathan. We have enough evidence to bury him legally. The SEC will be very interested in corporate espionage charges. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. Natalie sat beside him in their home office, watching emotions war across his face. The old Jonathan would have gone for complete destruction, would have used every resource to annihilate Grant professionally and personally. Let the SEC handle the legal side, Jonathan said finally. But I want to talk to him first. The phone call happened that afternoon, on speaker so Natalie could hear. Michael Grant's smooth voice answered on the second ring. Blake, I was wondering when you'd call. Your scheme failed, Jonathan said calmly. Rebecca confessed everything. The SEC has all the evidence they need. You're looking at serious federal charges. Can't prove anything, Grant replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, I can, but that's not why I called. Jonathan glanced at Natalie, drawing strength from her presence. I wanted you to know that you made one critical miscalculation. What's that? You thought destroying my company would destroy me. That Blake Technologies was all I cared about. But you were wrong. Jonathan's hand found Natalie's. While you were busy trying to ruin my business, you actually saved my marriage. You reminded me what really matters, your wife. Grant's voice dripped with mockery. How touching. More than you'll ever understand. Jonathan's voice was steady, certain. So thank you, actually. You helped me remember that success means nothing if you lose the people you love while chasing it. Jonathan ended the call without waiting for a response. In the silence that followed, Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. That was perfect, she said softly. I meant every word. Jonathan pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. A week ago, I would have spent months obsessing over destroying Grant. I would have made it my mission, let it consume me. But now I realize revenge isn't worth sacrificing what we're rebuilding. The new beginning 6 months later, Natalie stood in the gallery space Amanda had helped her find in the Mission District. Exposed brick walls, natural lighting, and enough room to display 30 of her best photographs from the past decade. Her first solo exhibition in 4 years. This is incredible, Jonathan said, walking slowly through the gallery, studying each image with genuine attention. He'd left the office at 3 o'clock, turning off his phone completely. You have such an amazing eye, Natalie. I forgot how talented you are. You forgot a lot of things, Natalie teased gently. But you're remembering now. He pulled her close, kissing her softly. Every day, and I'm not stopping. True to his promises, Jonathan had restructured his life over the past 6 months. He promoted Richard to co-CEO, delegating more responsibility. He established strict boundaries between work and home. Most importantly, he showed up for Natalie consistently. Whether that meant attending her photography exhibitions, taking spontaneous weekend trips, or simply being present during dinner conversations, Blake Technologies had survived the scandal. Grant was facing federal charges. Rebecca had cooperated fully with investigators in exchange for reduced penalties. And Jonathan had learned that success without balance was just another form of failure. "I have something to tell you," Jonathan said now, his gray eyes warm and full of love. "I've been thinking about what you said at the gala. About wanting more from life than just being Mrs. Jonathan Blake. I'm working on that." Natalie gestured to the gallery around them. "This is my something more, I know, and I'm so proud of you." He took her hands. "But I was thinking about our something more. Together." Natalie's heart began to race. "What do you mean?" "I want to start a family with you. Not because it's expected, or because we're supposed to, but because I can't imagine anything better than creating a life with the woman I love." Jonathan's voice was steady, certain. "What do you think?" Natalie felt tears spill over, happy tears this time. "I think yes. Absolutely yes." They stood there in her gallery, surrounded by images of the life she'd reclaimed, planning a future that finally felt balanced and real. The journey from invisible wife to true partner hadn't been easy. There had been pain, confrontation, and the hard work of rebuilding trust. But standing in Jonathan's arms, feeling truly seen and valued for the first time in years, Natalie knew it had been worth every difficult moment. Because the alternative was continuing to disappear. And she'd finally remembered that she deserved to be visible in her own life. "I love you," Jonathan whispered against her hair. "Not as an afterthought or an obligation, but as my first thought every morning and my last thought every night." "I love you too," Natalie replied. "The real you. The one who shows up, finally, after years of distance and months of healing." They were both truly present. Together in the way marriage was always meant to be. Equal partners building something beautiful. It's not just surviving in separate worlds. The crimson dress had done its job, shocking Jonathan awake. But the real magic was what came after. The hard conversations, the genuine change. The choice they both made every single day to prioritize each other over everything else. That was the love worth fighting for. And Natalie knew, watching her husband study her photographs with pride and genuine interest, that they would keep fighting for it. Together. Always together.